world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Monday, the 16th of March, year of our Lord 2026. Well, today we're going to take a look at the dire straits that Trump is in. He has nobody to blame but himself, but now he is calling out desperately for help from other countries. The conflicting narratives, it's very clear to everyone right now that Trump has no plan, never had a plan, unless the plan was to melt down the global economy. And we'll tell you the many ways that is coming at us. It's not just for the price of energy. That would be bad enough, but it's the knock-on effect. There are other things that there are going to be shortages of, even if they stopped now. The White House is in screaming panic. Scott Bessent was called out for an emergency meeting from an interview. Trump had to talk to him right then. What was that about? Well, we have an idea, and we'll tell you about that, as well as his desperation and panic about himself may wind up having him do more foolish things and put Marine boots in the ground. He doesn't care if people die for his folly. We'll be right back. But we're going to begin with some other news. Makers of Ozempic and Wegovy failed to report to the FDA deaths, suicidal ideation, and strokes from people using their products. And the result, after the FDA found out about this fraud, was to send them a reprimand. They got a letter. I'm sure that's a deterrent after they have made $35 billion just last year alone. And it is taking off. I mean, this thing is going sky high. Altogether, they estimate that they've had about $71 billion since these drugs were created. And half of that in the last year in the USA alone. And so you think that's going to deter them? No. And so, again, they're going to get a strong talking to. And perhaps at some point, they'll get a fine. You know, maybe that's what we should do with bank robbers, right? You go in and you rob a bank and get $1 million. We're going to give you a $20,000 fine. Okay, they're just going to look at it like a tax. So, the FDA slapped the company, slapped them with a warning letter. I bet that hurt their feelings. That is a prelude to a fine. And of course, they don't care about a fine. Just like Elon Musk doesn't care about fines. He's got all the money in the world. This is like the parent who keeps telling kids, don't make me come down there now, and never does anything, right? The FDA doesn't even look at this stuff. Again, you're free to do anything if you are an approved company. Now, if it's a natural product, you're not free to do anything. You're not free to do anything. But for everybody else, the FDA is the rubber stamp and the seal of approval, because, their defense is if you were harmed by their drug, well, hey, it was approved by the FDA. Why did the FDA approve it? Well, because you did a fraudulent study and you told them that it was safe and effective. And they just go with whatever you tell them. That's what the FDA does. A physician reported that a patient taking semaglutide committed suicide. Novo Nordisk opted not to investigate the case. The company reported a different case of suicidal ideation to the FDA only after agency inspectors stumbled on the record when they were investigating the unreported stroke death. And there's a whole lot of anecdotes in this report from Children's Health Defense. Independent studies have linked the drug to suicidal ideation. And again, why is it that we have so many of these pharmaceutical drugs that make people want to commit suicide? Why so many of them mess with your mind? I mean, it goes from being foggy to, severe depression, other things like that. I mean, we're talking about all these fluoride-based antibiotics and other things like that. I mean, the drugs that they give you, they really are, we used to joke about this and say, well, the pharmakia, the Greek word pharmakia in the Bible that's translated as sorcery, They said, yeah, it was hallucinogenic drugs that people would use as part of their religious worship in pagan societies. But these are drugs that basically have the same effect, even though that's not stated. I mean, suicidal ideation and crazy stuff like that, messing with people's minds, and this is whether you're talking about an antibiotic or a weight loss drug. Why is this now a common theme for the sorcerers and their apprentices at the FDA? In another case, Novo said it didn't investigate a patient death involving semaglutide, which is things like Ozempic and Wegovy, because the company hadn't received consent from the person who'd reported the death. But according to the FDA, consent is not required for a PADE investigation. Well, evidently nothing is required for FDA approval. If the FDA determined that the company's response is inadequate, the agency can pursue additional enforcement measures, including fines. Again, the fines don't matter to them when they're making $80 billion a year. Go ahead and hit me with a fine. This is where they need to balance the budget, not with tariffs. Let's put some real fines on some of these fraudulent companies. They're looking at 4,000 lawsuits in the U.S. for life-altering side effects. So again, the only question now, this is looking like glyphosate. The only question remaining is, when is Trump going to give them legal immunity by compelling them to manufacture Ozempic and Wegovy? He could say it's a national emergency. We got a national emergency of obesity, right? So we're going to have to manufacture these things. And since I'm compelling you to manufacture them, just like glyphosate, now you get legal immunity. I keep thinking back to his diet of McDonald's, that parody video where the aliens landed on the White House lawn, and the next thing you see, he's interviewing the guy in the Oval Office, and he introduces him as the two of them are eating McDonald's. He said, he's an extra cholesterol. In the U.S. today, about 1 out of 8 adults, an estimated 31 million people, say they are using now one of these GLP-1 drugs. About 1 in 5 adults, about 20%, have taken them at some point, according to a November 2025 poll. They said increasing reports of effects, including, here's some of the things that it does: gastrointestinal problems, acute pancreatitis, higher rates of gallbladder and biliary disease, kidney stones, arthritis, sleep disturbances, dental decay, malnutrition, hair loss, and loss of bone density and muscle mass. And that's just from the beginning. And then, of course, as soon as you get off, it's like getting off of a diet and you rebound big time. So you're stuck on it for life or until one of these conditions kick in big time. And it's very, very, very expensive too. Psychological side effects, including causing apathy among users. You don't even care that Trump is dragging us into World War III and a global depression. Yeah, I'm losing weight. That's all I need, right? So suicidal ideation, stroke, apathy. Plaintiffs include family members of people who died suddenly after taking the drug. They said there's also an issue of sudden blindness. The condition is called NAION. The British Journal of Ophthalmology found that among the 1 out of 10,000 people taking the drug who suffers from NAION, sudden blindness, Ozempic users are far more likely than Wegovy users. There you go. So again, they've already established what it is. They're just haggling over the statistics, right? And yet, in spite of that, the company is denying that it has any issue with it. There is a warning now about that condition of sudden blindness on the European label, but the FDA doesn't require it here in the United States. This is why I'm saying it's such a joke. MAHA is such a joke. RFK Jr.'s purpose was to restore trust in this corrupt, untrustworthy organization. Well, at least 56% of Americans now suspect the COVID-19, quote-unquote, vaccines caused mass deaths. Some people are starting to catch on. But, of course, most Americans still won't blame the father of the jab. It's just sugar water. Just take a little bit of aluminum and mercury. You can take that for Trump. Come on. It's sugar water. You don't want the really bad stuff. That's coming from Bill Gates. But this is coming from Trump. You can trust Trump, said Alex Jones. Well, only 35% still dismiss the idea. Folks, it is a bioweapon. It was designed for that. It has connections to the DoD and Department of Defense. But the real bioweapon is their germ game that they practiced since 2 months before 9/11. And that was the part that Trump executed. Going to lock everybody down and keep them locked down until we rush a vaccine out to them. And then, what Biden did was he came in on a tag team and mandated that. And so everybody in MAGA feels good about the fact that Trump hasn't betrayed them, that it was Biden who betrayed them. Well, part of what is happening, and I don't know if it's the drug stuff or not, but certainly Vivek the Snake Ramaswamy is, I don't know if it's the awareness of the vaccine. It's more likely his connection to the Republican Party and Trump. Trump has become an albatross. I tweeted out over the weekend, I said, Trump will be to the GOP what Jimmy Carter was to the Democrats. A long-serving, stinking, dead albatross around their neck, and deservedly so. They really do deserve it. They have more culpability even than the Democrats did for Jimmy Carter, because no matter what he does, and he keeps doing this stuff, they cover for him. And, Jimmy Carter wasn't a pedophile. They didn't have to cover for Jimmy Carter's pedophilia. He was a Sunday school teacher. I didn't think he was much of a president. His economic decisions were horrific. He didn't know what to do when we got hit with an OPEC oil embargo, and he didn't know what to do about the hostages in Iran. But those were not problems that he started. Trump created these problems as an unforced error. And so Jimmy Carter was incompetent in terms of trying to deal with this stuff. His thing, if you remember, everybody was talking about the general malaise, the bad feeling about America, and America is over. And, Jimmy Carter was just kind of whining about it. Trump, on the other hand, gets us to the same place by starting this stuff. And he gets us to this place not by malaise, but by arrogance, pride, hubris. That's how Trump got us into the same place. He started the war with Iran, and he started this oil embargo that's going to be worse than the OPEC oil embargo the longer it goes on. And there's no evidence whatsoever at this point that Trump or anybody in his regime have got a clue about what's going on. He's still desperately reaching and reacting. It's clear that there is no plan. There never was a plan. It was all based on wishful thinking, pride, and hubris. And so Ramaswamy was 10 points ahead of the Democrat not too long ago. Now they've changed places, and he is 10 points behind. Yeah, the Trump albatross. I looked that up because I thought, I always hear this expression. I've used it myself, and I never knew where that came from. You know where that came from, Travis? It came from this poem called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And so the albatross was at some point a harbinger of good things that were going to happen, or harbinger, bringing good luck or whatever. This guy who's a captain on the ship kills the albatross. And then things started going really, really bad for them. So the people in the poem hang it around his head. Sounded like Trump, right? Shoot the golden goose. So that's where that comes from. There's no evidence that ever happened in real life, however, until Trump. And then as I was talking about Wegovy and actually Novo Nordisk, which makes the drug that other people rename and market, and how the fine doesn't really matter to them. Inside the dirty dystopian world of AI data centers. And in this story, they're looking at just how awful what Elon Musk is doing in Memphis is. And I got to say, it's a pattern of behavior. We saw this back in Austin. in an area. I mean, we would have, if we'd stayed in Austin, he would have been our neighbor, and not a nice neighbor either at that. He had set up a facility there for SpaceX as well as for the Boring Company. And he was dumping stuff into the river there that violated all the building codes, and they asked him not to do it. He continued doing it. So they gave him a fine, and he just kept doing it. He just keeps paying the fine each month. He doesn't care at all. The Department of Transportation said, well, we don't want you coming out on this road over here. We want you coming out over here. He just ignored that as well. They fine him, and he pays the fine. Fines have no effect on him, just like fines have no effect on these big pharmaceutical companies. You know, the law, as one person has said, is very much like a spider's web that catches the small flies, but the big bumblebees just go straight through it. And these big bumblebees just go right through these fines that are spider's webs. The story says, as we drove through southwest Memphis, Keyshawn Pearson told me, keep my window down. He said our destination was best tasted, not viewed. Along the way, we passed an abandoned coal plant to our right, then an active power plant to our left, equipped with enormous natural gas turbines. Pearson, who directs the nonprofit Memphis Community Against Pollution, was bringing me to his hometown's latest industrial mega project. He said, then finally, as we went along, we came to it, a white-walled hangar, bigger than a dozen football fields, where Elon Musk intends to build a god. The Colossus is a data center that Musk's artificial intelligence company, xAI, is using as a training ground for Grok. It takes a staggering amount of energy. If run at full speed for a year, Colossus would use as much electricity as 200,000 American homes. Annually, those facilities could consume roughly twice as much electricity as the city of Seattle. To get Colossus up and running, xAI, and to do it quickly, xAI built its own power plant. This is kind of like what he did when Porsche came out with their electric vehicle, and he wanted to show that his plaid Tesla was faster. So Porsche was running this at the Nürburgring, a famous racetrack that, by the way, citizens could go pay to drive it on certain days. They had other days that were reserved for manufacturers. Anyway, he goes there, and I don't know if there was some kind of an incompatibility with plugs or whatever, but he set up his own charging station, running it off of a diesel generator that was very noisy, very dirty, and the neighbors were all complaining about it. So this is the guy who's doing this for the environment, you know, his EV, and he's got a diesel generator for it. Well, here he is doing essentially the same thing because he's got to do this quick and dirty. And that really is the way it is, quick and dirty. They move fast and they break things. And that is the ethos. These are the largest single points of consumption of electricity in history, said one person at Princeton University, who is looking at the AI data centers. And of course, don't regulate these things. That's what Trump and the Republicans pushed through. No regulation, state or local, of this stuff. Well, let's see if that could hold up. People need to use nullification. He has no authority under the Constitution to say that you can't regulate AI. People should regulate it. And of course, we've had a precedent for this. In 1996, it's 10 years after Reagan gave the vaccine companies their immunity, Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act and gave immunity to cell phone companies and other people who are going to be doing a lot of radiation type of things. And as part of that, they said local and state government cannot regulate the cell phone towers for health issues. They can only regulate them because of appearance issues. Because, you know, the company could adjust that if they've got some ugly antennas in a place that is, very expensive homes or doesn't match the architecture because it's some kind of Williamsburg architecture or something like that. They could force them to put some structures around it to hide it. However, they are like vaccines, inherently a threat to our health, inherently unsafe. And so they said, you can't regulate this. Well, a lot of localities have done that because they found cancer clusters at schools where they like to put these cell phone towers in a cluster. They also found then cancer clusters with their children. And so a lot of local and I don't know if it's been state or not, but local level regulation of these things and made them take them down. So you can there is a precedent for overriding these federal prohibitions against regulation if you wish, but it's going to take some people with some guts to do it and be able to withstand the attacks of billionaires who are going to put everybody in the world up against you. It's kind of the same type of thing that Thomas Massey is facing in Kentucky from Trump and the Zionist billionaires. So the tech industry will drop the equivalent of roughly 40 Seattles onto America's grid within a decade. Aggressive scenarios predict more than 60 in half that time. So some of them are saying the equivalent, I don't know why Seattle is their standard of energy usage. I guess they just looked that up and then started using that as the denominator for these things. But they're saying that it's going to be like adding another 40 Seattles in terms of energy consumption in a decade. Some people say in only 5 years it'll be 60. By 2030, U.S. data centers will consume more electricity than all of the country's heavy industries. Maybe that's because all the heavy industries are disappearing. More than the cement, steel, chemical, car, and other industrial facilities put together. How about that? Do you think maybe this is always a MacGuffin? That all this concern about climate change and energy use, that was always just the line they were feeding us in order to be able to do what they wanted? Of course it was. It just goes right out the door as soon as they've found these data centers. And of course, one of the reasons that Trump doesn't want to have any regulation of data centers is not just because he wants to help his billionaire donor class that owns him. It's also because the government has plans for the surveillance state and the police state using these things. That's the real issue, I believe. The government has been at the bottom of this all along. It's not just crony capitalism and corruption. There's also surveillance police state. Colossus was built so quickly that many of the residents there and elected officials didn't know what was happening until the project was well underway. Construction began in May of 2024, and by Labor Day weekend, less than 3 months after the press conference, it was up and running. The company installed its own gas turbines because that was faster than waiting on the local grid. And they argued that they didn't need a permit to do so because turbines would operate for less than a year. A claim that many lawyers are saying is just absolutely made up. But again, it's the same type of thing we saw Elon Musk do in Austin as well. When it comes to water use, the department, they just say we can do whatever we want. We don't really care. Go ahead, fine us. See if we care. Nuclear energy has its downsides as well, of course. That's what they want to turn to, Let's go to nuclear energy because it doesn't have any emissions. Well, not anything that you can see or smell, but they do have emissions of radiation. And the waste has to be stored almost indefinitely. There's still not there's some approaches to it, but still it's kind of the can that you kick down the road. The can of nuclear waste that you kick down the road for future generations to worry about. Can you do it with a breeder reactor? Can you recycle this stuff? Or what do you do with it? Well, we haven't figured out what to do with that yet. We'll just store it on site. How'd that work out for the people in Fukushima? And so this article comes back and says, but the dangers posed by the burning of coal are far more imminent. What a joke. I would rather burn coal for 1,000 years than deal with nuclear waste for a shorter period of time. Well, Google has been tracking every search, click, and voice command that you have made since 2005. And deleting your browser history does absolutely nothing. There is a way that you can get rid of some of that, but it is not easy to find. And when we talk about what is going to be happening with the dire straits, and we're coming up with that right after the break, here's another example that people don't typically talk about. I mean, typically it's all based on energy. And folks, that would be more than enough if that was only the energy. because that's going to percolate through everything. A value-added tax of inflation, just as we saw with the OPEC oil embargo. But this is something new. The entire chip industry is about to shut down, and nobody is panicking yet, says one person. He says, no helium, no semiconductors, no phones, no AI, no future. He says, well, maybe we'd be better off. I look at this and we look at the damage that's being done with the Federal Reserve and the federal government and all the rest of the stuff. If that goes down, it's going to be really tough. But I would say this is a case where the short-term pain, long-term gain would really be true. Not so much with the Iran war. That's their go-to meme that they always go back to. Long-term gain for short-term pain. But yeah, maybe it'd be that way in terms of computer chips if it could save us from AI, just like saving us from the fiat dollar. Helium is used to cool semiconductor manufacturing equipment. Without it, chip fabs cannot operate. There is no substitute for helium in this process, and most of the world's helium ships through Gulf routes that are now under fire. South Korea makes 60% of the world's memory chips. Samsung and other suppliers provide chips for Apple, NVIDIA, Tesla, and every AI company on Earth. And so this is something that is coming through the Straits of Hormuz. You shut that off, and that is, we're seeing this type of destruction of the supply chain everywhere. I mean, Trump was focused on that with his tariff stuff. How stupid do you have to be to try to shut down all global trade when you don't have a replacement for it? Yeah, if you got some fantasy world where you want America to be Fortress America and we just pull up the drawbridge and we don't trade with anybody and we're self-sufficient, okay, fine. But a part of that plan is how do you get to that state? You just can't shut everything down, which is what Trump began doing with his temper tariffs and his ego politics instead of geopolitics. And now he's doing it again with the Strait of Hormuz. So the domino effect is that helium stops shipping, chip fabs slow production within days. NVIDIA can't get enough chips. AI data centers can't get enough GPUs. Apple can't build phones. Tesla can't build cars. Every cloud server, every laptop, every smart device delayed. $600 billion semiconductor industry grinding to a halt. The Trump effect. A one-man fourth turning for global depression and likely war as well. And he and these other idiots around him are thinking about how much money they can make with the price of oil going up. It just is unbelievable how stupid they are. Their arrogance is exceeded only by their ignorance. And it's just not helium. It's also neon. It's every rare gas that ships through the Gulf and the Red Sea. Iran didn't need to fire a single missile at a chip factory. They just had to make the shipping lanes too dangerous to cross. The AI arms race, the chip war with China, the $2 trillion tech rally, all of it depends on a gas that nobody can ship right now. And so, as I said, we're going to talk about the dire straits that Trump has put us in. When we come back, we'll be right back. I don't know what happened. He was firing the APS commercial. I guess are we still streaming? Okay, all right. Well, we're back, and we have some comments and some tips. I'm Marty. Thank you very much for the tip. He says the gas gauge is either really low or broken. It's really low. Our strategic program reserve is running low, so our gas gauge is very low this month. So thank you very much, Marty. I appreciate that. And Audi, MRR, thank you. That's very generous. He said, good morning, David. A little shameless self-promotion. Well, certainly you can do that at any time. That is very generous. Thank you. I posted a new podcast episode with Angry Tiger as my guest on Everything is a Lie, Damn It. That ought to be really good. Angry Tiger. I'd love to hear Angry Tiger's take on all the economic chaos that's going on. That's really his area of expertise. It really is. That ought to be a great podcast. Again, Everything is a Lie, Damn It. And you can hear Audi, MRR, and Angry Tiger there. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Well, we have 10 Maersk ships are trapped in the Persian Gulf. And they're not the only ones trapped. It just happens to be the biggest shipper out of Denmark. I believe they're the world's biggest shipper. They said their ships can't get out. We're stuck in the upper Gulf. Can't leave the region. Even if a ceasefire allowed vessel traffic to begin moving, they said it would take a week to 10 days for the world's second largest liner to resume normal operations. And this is what we've seen before. When Trump threw a monkey wrench and everything 6 years ago, it created these problems. If you remember, it took a very long time. It's like a train wreck, or at least bunching things up. And it took a long time to take care of the backlog of ships that were trying to come into the LA port and other places like that. It is a fine-tuned machine that is distributed globally, and Trump doesn't have a clue or any respect for any of that. It's just like I remember when all this stuff happened, he started messing with the supply chain in an unprecedented way in 2020. And I covered Leonard Reed's I-Pencil. It's a principle, right? I-Principle, the I-Pencil principle. And that is that the market has set up a very complicated thing, and it's done it organically. And when you have these central planners, all they do is screw things up. And Leonard Reed wrote that to kind of as against central planning. He said there isn't anybody who came up with this. It just kind of evolved, and there's no central planner, and there's nobody telling them how much wood to plant or how much rubber, how much graphite to produce for your pencil. It just kind of comes together, and they're picking this stuff up from all over the world. And that is anybody who thinks that Trump is winning, that America is winning, needs to go back and read that essay from Leonard Reed, I-Pencil. So Iran on Wednesday used unmanned boats to attack 2 tankers, also deployed missiles and drones to attack ports, airports, and other landside targets in the Gulf region. 1 container ship sustained damage from unidentified projectiles. And so it was after Trump told the tankers, he said, hey, show some guts. You show some guts, buddy. Lead from the front. Why don't you go there? So he says, show some guts. Go through the Strait. They did, and they were bombed. The comment came during a Sunday interview with Brian Kilmeade, one of the worst of the press sycophants that I've ever seen. The president insisted Iran's military has been effectively neutralized by recent U.S. strikes. We've taken care of it. It's no threat. Just waves his hand, and it's gone. That is the fantasy world in which this liar lives. He may actually believe this stuff. It was always a question as to whether or not the Clintons believed the lies that they were telling everybody. They were so effective at lying, and I think he's kind of the same stuff. And so, show some guts. You try to go through the Strait of Hormuz, you might wind up showing some guts. You might be eviscerated and having your guts hanging out. So the framing collided almost immediately with events on the water. I'd call it not framing. I'd call it a lie. Yeah, you trust Trump, you're going to go down in flames. Within days, at least 2 commercial vessels were struck in Gulf waters for showing guts. 2 oil tankers burned after attacks near Iraq's port of Basra. At least 1 crew member killed. But then you had Warpeat come to the rescue. War Pete says.
Only thing prohibiting transit in the Straits right now is Iran shooting at shipping. It is open for transit should Iran not do that.
That's the definition of it being closed. And you are the Secretary of Defense. That is the absurdity of this guy. Isn't that amazing? Can you get any dumber than Pete Hegseth? I don't think so. Here's a longer version of that.
I'll take it and chime in, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like it all. I want to emphasize what the chairman said about that. The only thing prohibiting transit in the Straits right now is Iran shooting at shipping. It is open for transit should Iran not do that. Now, there's a reason why we chose, as one of our primary objectives, destroy the Navy. We understood the ability to interdict shipping is something Iran has done for 40 years. It's key terrain. They've used it as leverage. The world is seeing what they'll do.
So why didn't you defend it to start with? Why didn't you make that your first objective?
We've heard them talk about taking various measures, and we're planning for all of them. So we have a plan for every option here. We're working with our interagency partners.
I couldn't tell.
And that's not a strait we're going to allow to remain contested. Or
I couldn't see any evidence of a plan when I looked at what they're doing.
So we're aware of that. We're laser focused on our military objectives, but also want to make sure our partners across this government understand we're working with you to make sure that energy flows. And that's an important part.
Except that's not happening at all. Oh, we're taking care of their Navy. What was it, like, a half dozen small ships? We sunk it. And their Air Force. And they didn't have much of an army either. Well, guess what? Afghanistan didn't have an Air Force or a Navy. They didn't have much of an army that was organized. And we couldn't handle that either. It's called asymmetric warfare. You don't need to have those things, especially in an area like the Strait of Hormuz. And so, he says, when he says stuff like that, when he says, the Strait of Hormuz is open, I mean, if they don't shoot at you, it's fine. Then he comes out and he says, don't you dare criticize what we're doing in the war. If you do that, you're un-American.
Because you, and I mean specifically you, the press, specifically you, the press corps, because you cheer against Trump so hard, it's like in your DNA and in your blood.
It's Trump derangement syndrome if you criticize this stupid war.
Successful so bad.
Get a stupid
You
guy.
have to cheer against the efficacy of these strikes.
You're a murderer.
You have to hope.
You're a lawless murderer.
Maybe the way the Trump administration has represented him isn't true. So let's take half-truths, spun information, leaked information, and then spin it. Spin it in every way we can to try to cause doubt and manipulate the public mind over whether or not our brave pilots were successful. How many stories have been written about how hard it is to, fly a plane for 36 hours? Has MSNBC done that story? Has Fox? Have we done this?
I don't care how hard it is.
Have we done it 2 or 3 times?
I don't care if you got several tankers, airplane tankers that refuel the jets off the aircraft carriers and they collide and die. I don't care about that. Don't write stories about that. That makes Trump look bad. That means that you got Trump derangement syndrome. If you care about the lives of troops, if you care about peace and prosperity, you've got Trump derangement syndrome. How dare you criticize us? I think Colonel McGregor had the best description of War Pete that I've ever seen. He said, the guy, every time he talks, he sounds like a high school football coach. That's it. He's a high school football coach wannabe. And I wouldn't hire him if I was a principal, not to coach football. Trump knew the risk of Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz, and he went to war anyway. Yeah, the cowards and the yes men who, for the most part, are too fearful to stand up to him. People like Marco Rubio walking around in shoes that are too big for him because he was afraid to tell Trump that he's got small feet. So he lied about the shoe size. And then he's too stupid to go out and buy more shoes the proper size. And people are still making fun of this high video, which I thought was really funny. Look at how big they made the shoes.
I'm a puppet just for you. I do any little thing you say. I wouldn't have it any other way. Take my heart and take my soul. I'm giving you complete control.
Yeah, that's right. Puppet man. Well, before the U.S. went to war, you had General Dan Kane, who was talking not only about do we have enough ammunition and allies to handle these missile strikes, he also, as the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, also told Trump that it was very likely that Iran would shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, everybody knows that. I said it. Gerald Celente has said it over and over again. It's just common sense. But of course, Trump doesn't have any common sense, and nobody wants to stand up to him. So you got one guy who is standing up to him. The General Kane said in several briefings that U.S. officials had long believed that Iran would deploy mines, drones, and missiles to close the world's most vital shipping lane, according to people with knowledge of the discussions. Trump acknowledged the risk, these people said, but moved forward anyway, with the most consequential foreign policy decision of two presidencies. He told his team that Tehran would likely capitulate before they were able to close the strait. And even if Iran tried, the U.S. military could handle it. As I said, profound arrogance about the might of the U.S. military and profound ignorance about the nature of the enemy. A gigantic country, 90 million people. And they knew this was coming, and they had a lot of contingency plans for leadership change. He thought he could take them out with just a decapitation strike. Well, they got their decapitation, but the country is still moving on because they planned for that. The Strait of Hormuz has emerged as Tehran's most potent leverage point. It hasn't emerged. We always knew it was the case. Everybody knew it except Trump. And again, the people around him, like his Secretary of State, is too much of a sheep to even get shoes that fit him. It's like, how pathetic this whole thing is. So the commander-in-chief, full of pride and hubris, decides that he'll do whatever he wants. He doesn't care about the recommendations of the military. So as a result, U.S. crude is, I think right now around $80 per barrel. It has gone as high as 120, and I saw where it was at 103 not too long ago. So I don't know whether it's 80 or 103. Nevertheless, there's no reason that it won't go to 200. As a matter of fact, if the war were to stop today, because of all the shipping disruptions that Trump has caused and his war in action has caused, and for the damage that has been done already to some of these facilities, it take a while before everything is fixed. Again, when you look at the damage that Trump did 6 years ago with his lockdown in the U.S., we're still not recovered from that. And there's still, globally, there's issues that are happening with that. And so if he keeps this thing going, Iran is going to start blowing up infrastructure that'll take a long time to replace, if ever. So all of these ports, as well as the oil refineries, as well as the oil fields, these things are tinderboxes, easily taken out with missiles. And so the Trump administration is attacking Karg Island. They haven't attacked the oil facilities there yet, but that is Iran's big refinery area. And Iran has promised that, hey, if you take out our refineries, we'll take out all of the refineries of your allies. You know, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and many of these others. It's going to have a profound, long-lasting effect on oil supplies, even if Trump were to come to his senses and pull these people out. But he's looking to double down on all this stuff. He's now sending Marines, an amphibious ship that holds about 2,200, 2,500 Marines. It's on a 2-week voyage. This is like the Falkland Islands thing again. You know, remember that? When Argentinians took over this worthless piece of land that was, again, ego. It was all ego-based. There's absolutely nothing that they needed. There was no resources, nothing. But it was a threat to their pride. And so they attack and take over the Falkland Islands, and Margaret Thatcher sends this slow-moving armada to attack them 2 weeks, and they got to get out of there. Well, Trump is doing the same thing. And a lot of people are going to die from this. The Trump administration does not have a timeline for when the strait will be made safe for commercial shipping again, said Caroline Levitt. In other words, there's no timeline. There's no plan, right? If you don't have a timeline, you don't have a plan, right? If you, it's just like your personal life. I've got a goal of such and such, but if you don't have a time certain to do it, you don't have a goal. You've got a wish. That's why I say all this stuff about 2030 and the new global society that they want to have, they are very specific about when they want to have this happen because these people do have a plan. Trump, I think, is part of the plan. He is the plan to tear everything down so they can build it back better with themselves as king. Trump's energy secretary, Bessent, dodged, I'm sorry, not Bessent, that's his treasury secretary. This is his energy secretary. And he goes on some of the Sunday shows and they ask him these questions. They said, well, you know, we were at $103 a barrel on Friday. The Iranians say it might go to $200. What do you say?
The price of a barrel of oil closed above $103 on Friday, and the Iranians are warning of prices hitting $200 a barrel. Mr. Secretary, should Americans be bracing for, should they be worried that this war will actually drive the price of oil above $200 a barrel?
So Iran for 47 years has called the United States the Great Satan. So because they call us the Great Satan, I don't think we are the Great Satan. In fact, clearly we're not. So I don't listen much
I think
to
you just proved them right.
projections of what's going to happen.
So that's a no?
There is disruptions
Is
of
that a
flow
no?
in a very important waterway. I would pay no attention to what Iran says, but there is a lot of energy that flows through the Straits of Hormuz. And depending upon the timing and the manner in which this conflict comes to an end, we're going to see some elevated pricing until we get there. Where it's going to go, we have done many, many actions to mitigate that price rise.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Done a lot of actions to mitigate that. Well, you didn't secure the Strait of Hormuz. It came as a surprise that you'd have to do anything about it. So, yeah, we got the situation under control. Don't believe the Iranians, right? Death to America. You know, that always works, doesn't it? You play that card. Well, they shouted death to America for internal consumption. And who wouldn't? After 20 years of a king, the Shah, that's what Shah means in Persian, king, we overthrew their elected government. And we put in a dictator with a secret police trained by CIA and Mossad. No wonder they call us the Great Satan. No wonder they call Israel the Little Satan. They suffered for a couple of decades under that. And everybody's, in America, their understanding of Iran begins with the takeover of the embassy. No understanding of why the embassy was taken over. As a matter of fact, in the interview we aired, I thought it was interesting. It was something that I kind of vaguely remembered hearing it, but I'd forgotten about it. The fact that the U.S. Embassy staff was shredding all these documents, and when they took it over, they had this big pile of shredded documents, and they had students come in, meticulously put these documents together to show what the CIA and its puppet Shah were doing. And they made a museum out of the embassy so people would not forget just how criminal the U.S. government is. So, yeah, death to America. Well, and then he went on to another show. They asked him the same question, and he still doesn't have an answer.
In these few weeks, the question is how hard is the pain and how much are people going to have to endure? Gas prices are going up. Jet fuel prices are jumping, and CEOs are saying that ticket prices are also going to go up. Iran just said that the world should be ready for oil at $200 a barrel. You don't agree with Iran on anything, but do you agree that people need to be prepared for that?
We're going through short-term energy disruption for just huge long-term gain. You're seeing Iran's behavior.
Could that hit? Could short-term mean $200 a barrel?
I would say unlikely, but we are focused on the military operation and solving
we don't really care.
the problem. I'm not going to guess on short-term trading. That's based on psychology more than flows of oil. The world is very well supplied with oil right now. Thanks to President Trump's leadership, we're by far and away the world's largest oil producer, by far and away the world's natural gas producer. Both of those are growing.
It doesn't really matter. He needs to go back and do a little bit of history. And this is why I said from the very beginning how catastrophic this is going to be, how much worse than the OPEC oil embargo. Again, That was directed only at the United States, but it caused oil prices to go up globally. And they're creating shortages of all kinds of things, like I just mentioned before. Helium and other gases that are vital for industrial purposes that are at the very substrate of our society. And so when you look at what happened with the OPEC oil embargo, again, it was the Arab countries that were angry about the Yom Kippur War and our support of Israel. And they said, we're not going to sell oil to the U.S. Well, at that point in time, it was only the OPEC oil was only 19% of our oil supply. And that was only of the United States. I'm sorry, the OPEC was not 19%. All of our imported oil, and not all of it came from OPEC, all of our imported oil was 19%. So it was considerably less than the 20% that the Strait of Hormuz is cutting off for the world. You cut off maybe half of that for the United States, and it created a tremendous amount of economic disruption, inflation, and harm, that a value-added tax that was added to everything for a while. And so now he's saying, don't worry about it. We got a war we got to fight. You didn't have to do that. There was absolutely no threat to the United States. The threat was to Israel. And Israel needs to pay for this. But of course they don't. They are getting money from us as well. Experts have warned of a devastating impact on the global economy should oil reach anywhere close to the $200 threshold. I don't see why it wouldn't. The Atlantic argued that $200 oil could plunge the world into a recession, could raise borrowing costs, could alter the outcome of ongoing wars, and shift the balance of global power in favor of Russia and China. This is the other issue, right? Trump doesn't do geopolitics. He does ego politics. Everything that he has done has been a tremendous boon to Russia and especially to China, because Iran is an ally of China. They're saying, well, any Chinese ships can go through the Strait of Hormuz, and if you transact business in the Chinese yuan, you can go through. They're doing everything they can to support China economically. And Trump hasn't got a clue. And all this stuff about pushing back against China and or Russia, they are the big winners out of all this. They just sit on the sideline peacefully and reap the results of winning. Trump claimed when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. Well, if the rest of the world is in a depression, who's going to buy your stuff? And it's going to drag us into World War III. So I said, the man is a one-man fourth turning. Depression and World War. That's what he's bringing on. And it's all in his lap. Not only was it unnecessary for him to have this war, but he didn't even think it through. It was all just reactionary, shooting from the hip, an idiot. Just making an economic point that we are the largest producer of oil. So again, why then are our prices going up? Well, because just like I said before, prices went up in Europe, even though the OPEC oil embargo of 73 was targeted toward the United States. All the ships rise with that kind of inflation. And so he really doesn't know what he's doing. So the Hormuz choke point claims its next victim, the world's largest aluminum smelter, has now cut capacity. This is located in the Middle East. They've cut output by 20% on Sunday, marking yet another troubling development for the global economy. This is the knock-on effect. Not only does energy percolate through the price of everything, because there's, especially with distributed lines, supply lines, and all the rest of the stuff, every product has got multiple components of transportation in it, whether it's coming into this country or even if we manufacture it domestically. We have this distributed just-in-time kind of supply system, which is great when everything's working, but when you got a monkey like Trump behind the reins, throwing wrenches into everything, it gets bad very quickly. And so now it's not just energy, it's now spreading into industrial metals. And again, the next thing is going to be helium and other stuff like that. So other byproducts, chip manufacturing, and Trump is absolutely clueless. But now he's starting to see how bad this is, and he's demanding that the UK and other nations, he's kind of like the uncle from a what was that? Hard Day's Night, I think it was, or something. The movie where they had this curmudgeon Uncle Travis going, I don't know. I don't even barely remember it. I was so young.
Before my time.
That's right, way before your time. But there was this one black and white movie that they did, and they had this uncle, and all he wanted to do was to start fights with everybody. He's trying to, pit everybody against everyone else, everybody in the group against each other in the group, as well as everybody that was outside the group against them, and so forth. And I said, for the longest time, I said, Trump is like that guy. He just wants conflict everywhere. He thrives off it. Well, now he needs some help. Trump has called on countries, including the UK, to send vessels to the Strait of Hormuz to protect the global oil trade. He's claimed that oil tankers could still be targeted by Iranian forces, despite having insisted that the U.S. has destroyed 100% of Iran's military capability. They don't have any air force. They don't have any navy. You're safe. Show some guts. Get blown up. Many countries, especially those who are affected by Iran's attempted closure of the Hormuz Strait, will be sending warships, he said, in conjunction with the U.S. to keep the strait open and safe. Is this Hegseth boasting that's happening now, the high school football coach? He says, hopefully, China, France, Japan, South Korea, the UK, and others that are affected by this artificial constraint will send ships to the area. This is the summary of his war plans. Hopefully, that's it. I got a wish fulfillment here that I want to see happen, and I know that we're going to call a friend and we're going to get them to help us. You notice he didn't say Israel. He's not counting on any help from Israel to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, because I guess he probably asked them. They told him to get lost, right? We got our own things that we want to do. So we're not getting any help from Israel, but he thinks we're going to get help from China. What an idiot. He doesn't understand that China is an ally of Iran, and China is winning in all of this. They're not affected by this, and they are supported by Iran. So how clueless can this liar get? Yeah, hopefully it's all going to work out. Hopefully these other people are going to come and they'll keep the strait open because we forgot to do it. Or we were so prideful that we thought we would bring them to their knees with one strike. A country that large with 90 million people. One of the other things he's saying is, we're not getting regime change because the people are afraid to go out on the street. They're afraid they're going to get shot. It's like, you would have had regime change, I think, if he would have been patient, because it's not a good regime, and the people are already looking to change it. They are not afraid of getting shot, I don't think. It basically has helped the regime. They've lost support is what's happened, because they're still out en masse for funerals. They're still out in the streets doing other stuff. They are defiant, just like every civilization is. When you bomb the civilians, everybody gets defiant. That's the way it worked with every country. And it's beyond stupid that the Pentagon keeps doing these asymmetric wars, keeps bombing civilians, thinking that it's going to cause them to overthrow their own government. No, it makes heroes out of their own government. And it doesn't break the will of the people, as Hitler thought. So he says many countries will send warships, and we're going to be bombing the hell out of the shoreline. He must have gotten that line from War Pete, the high school football coach. U.S. strikes on Karg Island escalate as Trump claims allies are sending warships to Hormuz. Military targets on Karg Island have been hit, but he warned Iran's critical oil infrastructure could be the next target. And Iran said, you blow up our oil refineries and we'll blow up everybody else's oil refineries. Mutually assured destruction. Except the problem is you've got a guy who doesn't understand that anymore at the helm. Iran vows bigger regional retaliation. They warn the UAE that U.S. hideouts there are now legitimate targets. UAE oil port was hit, and the U.S. embassy in Baghdad caught fire after an apparent drone strike. Actually, I think it was a missile strike, I think was what I saw. hit them in this massive facility that they built in Baghdad, the U.S. Embassy. They call it the Green Zone. It's smack dab in the center of it. Lebanon ground and air war. Major Israeli strikes in Lebanon, especially in Beirut, have killed at least 826 people, which is pretty amazing when you look at the fact that the U.S. and Israel's strikes have killed 1,450 people in Iran. They're taking a very heavy hit in Lebanon, especially when you were to adjust this for population. Trump rejected efforts by Middle Eastern allies to hold talks aimed at ending the war in Iran, according to Reuters. Yeah, he's really good at killing. He may be better than Obama. Remember when MAGA was appalled and mocked Obama for saying, I'm really good at killing? Obama denied that. But Pete Hegseth boasts about it at every conference that he does. How is it that we have people who, we used to have even Obama used to be ashamed enough about what he was doing, what he said in private, that he would deny it in public. Then we get this clown, this high school football coach, War Pete, who boasts about it every time he gets on the microphone, about how many people he's killing. Trump as well. Iran threatened to reduce U.S.-linked oil facilities to a pile of ashes. The Iranian Foreign Ministry says the choke point is open, however, to any country except the U.S. and Israel. So there you go. I guess War Pete can say, I was right. It's open if they don't shoot at you. They only shoot at us. So from data centers to skyscrapers to water desalination plants, it now appears that Iran's drone strikes are spilling over into the Gulf financial infrastructure. It's reported that some banks have pulled staff from buildings, shifted operations remotely, that Citibank has temporarily suspended certain in-person activities in the UAE. And of course, Iran said, we're going to do that. These banks are targets now. Citi is a major node in the petrodollar system, especially in the Gulf region, where it handles oil trade finance, dollar settlements, and services for sovereign wealth funds and multinational corporations. Trump may kill not only energy in the global economy, but he may kill the dollar as reserve status. I mean, who wants to depend on a crazy country that could keep somebody like Trump in power? So one oil chief executive has said that Trump is risking, quote, biblical disaster with a new reaction to a panic situation. I don't know, biblical disaster, what is that? It's just like raining fire and brimstone down on Sodom and Gomorrah. He said, markets don't like it when governments intervene in pricing. He said, the move that's being talked about now would risk a biblical disaster if investors lost confidence in markets to be able to set the price of critical commodities. And this, I think, is what Besant was kind of shaken about, what the latest harebrained scheme from Donald Trump. The idea of the U.S. Treasury selling front-month crude futures is getting more attention than usual. Given the current panic situation, we cannot completely rule it out. The Treasury Department declined to comment on the speculation, but a spokesperson for the Department of Energy said it's not been involved in oil derivatives trading or advising other government agencies on that course of action. So is Trump getting ready to do something really, really stupid in terms of market manipulation? It sounds exactly like what he would do. Listen, watch this. This is Scott Bessent was being interviewed, and he gets called out to go talk to Trump. I need to talk to you right now. Come here right now in the Situation Room.
I listened to you on the...
The president wants you. Sorry, the president wants you right away.
Oh, okay. Okay. No problem at all.
No problem at all. No, I think there is a big problem.
Surely, Mr. Secretary.
You can work that in.
Mr. Secretary, I have to say, it's a first, I'm sure a last as well, that an interviewee's been pulled away to go to the Situation Room. How was the president? Was he stressed?
No, the president is in great spirits.
He's shaking.
The Iranian mission is proceeding well ahead of schedule. And I have to tell you, Wolf, that I have a teenager who's considering military service, And I could give this team my highest compliment, from President Trump to the head of the Joint Chiefs to the Secretary of War. I would say that I would trust my child's life in their hands.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I wouldn't trust my sons to be in this high school football team. This guy is crazy. He may try to kill you on the track and training or something. But yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the president wants you, said the woman. A shocked look from Besant as well as a journalist. Yeah, if I was a journalist, I'd be wondering if there's an incoming nuclear bomb. Hey, we got to get you in the bunker right away. Come on, forget about the interview. I mean, think about the narcissism of Trump, that he would do something that stupid. He really doesn't care how people are going to react even to it, right? It's like he's doing an interview. How's this going to look? What signal is this going to telegraph to people of panic and all the rest of the stuff? He doesn't care. He says, I need to see him right now. I don't care what he's doing. Again, he's got a teenager, he said, who's considering military service, as he was stuttering about that. Yeah, he does. He's got a boy and a girl. They're in their teens. Exact age is not known. Something that he and his homosexual partner did was surrogacy. And so anyway, he said, I would trust my child's life in their hands. That does not bode well for his judgment as Secretary of the Treasury for anything. Besant's appearance comes days after the president announced he planned to sever all trade with Spain after they refused to allow the U.S. to use their military bases to strike Iran. Again, it's not geopolitics, it's ego politics. And he thinks that he's going to get, after he's insulted Spain, after he's insulted the UK Prime Minister, he's no Winston Churchill or whatever, right? Now they're going to come save his butt there in now that he's in dire straits. Well, he says that he's going to do something about the Strait of Hormuz by force. Well, as the UK Telegraph says, Iran's plan to turn the Strait of Hormuz into a death trap for Trump. Trump won't be killed. It'll be the soldiers that he sends to his death, the Marines that he sends. It is a desperate yet shrewd move by a regime which has lost most of its conventional military force. So they're not talking about any shrewd moves by the U.S. government. They're talking about Iran. But it still has plenty of tools left in its arsenal to cause regional chaos and to inflict pain on the West. It's called asymmetric warfare. As I said before, Afghanistan didn't need a navy. Afghanistan didn't need an air force to defeat the U.S. government, and neither does Iran. The threat of Iranian missiles and drones raining down on commercial ships has led to a de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz, despite what Pete Hegseth said. It's open unless they shoot at you. These people are just... Anyway, Susie Wiles is at the center of a screaming panic inside the Trump White House, was reported. Energy Secretary Chris Wright, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, getting screamed at to find some good news, said industry executives. Again, the Iranians might be screaming death to America, but Trump is making it happen. So you got Susie Wiles. She knows the price that they're going to pay politically. And so she's screaming, find some good news, do something. I don't know what's going on. Everybody's trying to react. You know, it was because he didn't want to think about the Strait of Hormuz, because he wanted to do whatever Israel told him and whatever his pride told him. He just dismissed it because it wasn't pleasant to think about. And so now they got to deal with it. And so now it's not when the military told him, you know, you need to think about what's going to happen in the Strait of Hormuz. He ignores it. So now they're going to the Energy Secretary and the Interior Secretary. Caroline Leavitt dismissed the reporting as sensationalist, unverified gossip. She said, nobody is panicking. Let me just say this. If Caroline Leavitt is not lying again, if nobody is panicking, that may be even more scary than if they were panicking, because that means that they still don't understand the severity of what they've done, and they still don't understand the cost to America, and they still don't understand the cost to them and their stupid political goals. So if they're not panicking in the White House, That's maybe the scariest thing out of all of this stuff. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at Weekend at Bibi's. Is Netanyahu really dead? It's kind of an interesting group of analyses of data that's happening and pictures. And are these pictures real? Are they fake? This is another aspect we've never dealt with in a war before, which is, how on social media they will put out real clips of old events that happened somewhere else and claim that they were in Israel or claim that they were in Iran or whatever. And then we got a lot of fake computer-generated stuff as well. This is a first time that we've seen this type of thing. We're going to take a look at that when we come back.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
Well, welcome back. Let's take a look at the claims that have been circulating now for almost a week that Netanyahu was killed in an air raid strike. And it hit the area, hit his house, the area where his family lived, a lot of destruction that was there. The journalist who reported it, who, when he reported it, said, there's Bibi right now. He's walking through the rubble, and he's very far in the distance. It's difficult to tell from the camera whether or not that was him. That journalist has now been arrested. And so there has been a back and forth about whether or not Bibi is alive. But I think one of the big clues, and one of the things that inclines me to believe that he's either dead or in a coma, are not the pictures that we see on the internet, or the obviously fake videos that the Israeli government has been putting out. But the fact that his son, who was doing 30 to 40 tweets a day, and here's what somebody did, they went kind of scroll through his channel. He was putting out 30 to 40 tweets a day. All of a sudden, on the day that Netanyahu was allegedly bombed and killed, all of a sudden it just stopped. And he hasn't done anything since then. So that's one of the interesting things. And, of course, the next day he had an appointment with a high-ranking U.S. official. He canceled that appointment. He hasn't been seen at any of these meetings. They've got meetings, for example. He keeps scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. You can see that Yair Netanyahu, who is setting out the war in Miami, has been a keyboard warrior in terms of Twitter. Putting out lots and lots of content until the alleged attack. And so we had first a video that was put out by, after a lot of silence, after Netanyahu, this is still running. It's amazing. And this is all just in a few days he's putting that. But we're going to stop that there. Immediately, you started seeing him not showing up at meetings, but after several days, they put out a video, and then at one point, it kind of looked like he had 6 fingers, right? And so it became a joke. people started doing AI videos where he says, "I got several reasons why I'm not dead." He goes, and then he goes something, and it finally gets to number 6, and he holds up one hand, and there's 6 fingers on it, and he gives his reason. And then he holds up his hand again, and he goes, and number 7, now he's got 7 fingers on that hand, and he gives the reason for why, whatever it was he was talking about. So a lot of people have been having fun with that one. And so they did another video. And this one, although you could look at the other one and you could say, well, I don't know if that's 6 fingers or if that's an artifact of blurring or something like that. But the second video that they put up to push back against the 6-finger video was even worse. Definitely AI, no question about it. And so it's created something that they call Coffeegate. As a matter of fact, this is what, I think I've got the clip in here. Yeah, here's the original clip that he put up. They put up a video of him going to a coffee shop, and he holds up his hand. He goes, hey, 5 fingers or whatever, I think. It's in Hebrew, so I can't really tell. But he holds up his hand like 5 fingers and everything, and he kind of engages with the video there a little bit. But it's actually created a lot more issues. Here's what the video looks like so that you get an idea of it. Yeah, so what's up?
אני מת על קפה, אתה יודע מה? אני מת על העם שלי. איך הם מתנהגים, פנטסטי. אתה רוצה לספור את מספר אצבעות?
See, only got 5 fingers, right? Both hands.
לחיים.
Okay, so now that's what it looks like. Now, people have gone through this, and the reason we got Coffeegate is because there's a lot of issues with it. First of all, okay, the coffee cup. Now look at this. It's absolutely totally full. He doesn't spill any of it, even though he tilts it. Look at that. Tilts the coffee cup. Doesn't spill any of it at all. And puts it back down again, and then later he takes a drink, and then there's other issues with that. So in other words, this is what the coffee cup looks like in a freeze frame, right? Coffeegate. It's not spilling out. It's really strange. And then he has a drink, and you may not be able to tell that off the broadcast there, but on the left side, he takes a drink and takes it down from his mouth, and you can see a little bit of coffee and cream and whatever on his lips, just a little bit. And but it's definitely there. And then like 2 seconds later, it's gone. And so that was the other aspect of it. The coffee cup, the coffee lips. But I think this is the most convincing part of it right here. And that is his pocket that adjusts itself. Here he is. He's starting to put his hand in his pocket. And look, the pocket moves over to his hand. What do you think, Travis? You think that's legit? I'll play that again. Here is the pocket that moves over to him, his hand. Self-adjusting pocket that is there. And then there's also his nose, which if you look at on the right, that is the real BB, and on the left, that is what they believe is the adjusted artificial intelligence. And some people have said the ears are different as well. And then they went through and he actually visited this place, and back in 2024, I think it was March, and so they said, looks like he took this old video and repurposed it. And one of the reasons they say that is because when some of the people zoomed in on the like payment machine that was there, it had that date on it, which is the 13th of March, 2024. But then the other question is, since he's missed all of these meetings everywhere, he missed the meeting with the U.S. official. He's missed all these meetings with his Security Council and all these other things. Why is he at a coffee shop in the middle of this war as he's canceling all of these other meetings and appointments everywhere? As one person said, if he is alive, that may kill him politically for being AWOL with all this other stuff that is happening out there. But looking at those different artifacts and questionable things, some people fed it into some of the programs that look at authenticity, and they fed it into one called Hive. This is the Hive conclusion. They said 96.9% likely to have been AI generated. As a matter of fact, other people did the same thing with Grok, which, as I said before, Grok is pretty astute at finding artifacts and things like that in videos, and also looking at real videos and saying, well, this is originally was aired at such and such a time and this place and that type of thing. Grok basically says, somebody said, is this a video AI? The coffee didn't spill. It says, yes, this is AI-generated deepfake parody. Coffee, except it came from Netanyahu's own people. Coffee physics is the giveaway. Foam shakes like water, not like a real latte. The abrupt foam pattern changes and zero sloshing spill despite tilts, sips, and gestures. And the other thing I noticed right off the bat was after he took a sip, it was still the same level. It was still like basically overflowing. Speech is incoherent nonsense too. The authentic version is on Netanyahu's account from earlier today, they said. So again, they're saying that there is an authentic version, but the other one that was there was deep fake. So now the question is, did somebody create a deep fake video off of that and put that out as kind of like a double agent type of thing? Again, the levels of deception and propaganda that are possible with AI, we've never seen that before. It brings a whole new level of the fog of war to all of this stuff. Then there's another picture that people are disputing, and that is Bibi and the Rebel. This one right here. Okay, it's a couple of those. Do we have a bigger one of that? I don't know if I put that in or not. Yeah, there we go. There's a closer picture of one of those two. And people asked that, gave that picture to some of these AI detectors and said, is this genuine or fake? And they came up with a very high percentage certainty that it was genuine. As a matter of fact, I did it myself on that picture. I didn't know how to do it with a video, but I knew how to do it with a still picture. And it analyzed it and said it was 96.9% likely or genuine, right? And they said, here's why and they gave reasons as to why they thought it was genuine. Here it is, but it's a little bit small for you to read. I'll read it to you. Basically, 4 different areas: human presence and interaction, facial expression and details, image quality and noise, and clothing and shadows. And here's what they said in each of those. They said, for example, in the human presence and interaction, the image shows multiple people interacting closely, which is difficult for AI to generate naturally in a realistic manner. The physical connection and positioning of the hands indicate genuine human interaction. Then when it comes to facial expressions and details, the faces display natural asymmetry and natural imperfections, such as the wounds or the marks on the older man's face, that'd be Netanyahu. These details appear to be organic and consistent with real-life injury or struggle, making it very unlikely to be AI-generated. Then when it comes to image quality and noise, it says the photo has a grainy texture, lower resolution, and natural light diffusion, which are typical of real candid photography rather than the crisp clarity AI often produces. The dust or smoke in the background adds to the image's authenticity and imperfection. And the last category, clothing and shadows, the clothing shows natural folds and shadows caused by uneven light sources with no signs of artificial smoothness or uniformity. The shadow transitions on the faces and bodies appear imperfect, consistent with real lighting conditions. So the bottom line is that when you look at the AI analysis of these things, the coffee cup video, Coffeegate, appears to be almost certainly a fake. And the video, the picture of him being pulled out of the rubble, unconscious and injured, that appears to be genuine. But then in addition to it, as I said before...
real quickly, I just want to say, it's important to remember that they can still stage, photo events and things like that in real life. We need to not get so focused on AI and whether something is AI generated that we forget that they can pull these things off in real life. They could have a film studio set somewhere where they have rubble in there. You pretend to pull BB out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, look at the fact of what these people did with 9/11. Or I think the Trump attempted assassination. I don't believe that was real, but it also wasn't AI. So yeah, they got a lot of tricks up their sleeve. I think the key thing is the fact that his son went silent. that he's missed all these meetings. As a matter of fact, here's on the Security Council meeting, says there. Unusual that he wasn't chairing it. He wasn't even there. And then we have the journalist who did the initial report.
Right now in one of the locations that was attacked, you can see just behind me Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has visited this place. This is one of the locations where a deadly attack took place. 9 people were killed, and there were, in fact, more than 25 who were injured out here. You could see Netanyahu, in fact, visiting this particular location out here.
Now, that's supposed to be Netanyahu, but you can't really tell.
Picking up in Bet Shemshesh, where, in fact...
So again, was he arrested because, hey, nobody's going to film here for whatever, even if it supports our narrative? Or they start having second thoughts about whether or not that was really Netanyahu that was there. Who knows? A lot of mysterious stuff. Bottom line is, we all know that if he was killed or if he was in a coma, that they would they would never admit it at this point. It would be too much of a morale booster for Iran and too much of a victory for them to ever admit that. So that's the reality of where it is. But I think it's very key that he hasn't attended any of these meetings. And if the best that he can do is to say, well, I've skipped all the meetings as we're in this existential war. I've skipped all important meetings internally as well as with the United States. But I got time to go hang out at a coffee shop. If he's not dead or in a coma, he may be politically dead after that. But let's talk about the lives of American soldiers. The Pentagon is sending assault ships, at least 2,500 Marines, toward Iran as U.S. works to reopen the Strait of Hormuz while oil prices spike. Amazing. The Pentagon's deploying the USS Tripoli and thousands of military service members in the Middle East after President Trump vowed Friday to unleash unparalleled firepower. And again, you look at what some military people have said. Scott Ritter, who's been very critical of what the Trump administration is doing, and for good reason, and he's been shown right time and time again, said, well, we talk about amphibious landings. He goes, we really haven't done these since World War II that much. And he said there's reason for it. He said the modern technology has changed the calculus for that. It's basically suicidal now with what people have. It's kind of like the reason we don't have cavalry charges anymore, right? So there's certain things that are very valuable at one point in time, but then they become artifacts of history. And he says, hopefully there's going to be somebody in the Marines that, even if it comes down to it, they're going to put their career and their future on the line to save the lives of Marines rather than having this idiotic landing that is only going to feed the ego of Trump and War Pete. The Pentagon is deploying the USS Tripoli, thousands of military service members to the Middle East. The deployment of the amphibious assault ship is expected a 2-week voyage from where it is in East Asia. And so this is matching Energy Secretary Chris Wright's prediction of reopening the crucial waterway by the end of the month. Well, I don't think that's going to do it. And what is the objective to this stuff? Again, they're not going to discuss strategy, but what could they possibly do with this? Once these guys, they're going to be cut to pieces if they try to do a amphibious landing with the kind of stuff. It would be a suicidal mission, but Trump's not beyond that for his virtue signaling and his ego. Nothing else really could be accomplished. Are you going to go to Karg Island? You're going to destroy their oil facilities? Then that's going to set the entire Middle East on fire. So question is that typically these expeditionary units consist of several warships and about 5,000 Marines and sailors. So they're saying that this is one of a group of 3 of these ships, and they're saying it's only about 2,200 to 2,500. I've seen different numbers there. So they're not even going to put a full expeditionary force together. I guess they still don't really understand what is going on at the Strait of Hormuz, if that's the issue there. Fox News chief national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin, reported that approximately 2,500 Marines are part of the repositioning. The Japan-based Tripoli was spotted sailing alone south of Taiwan on Thursday, the U.S. Naval Institute reported, leaving it unclear whether it'll be joined by the USS San Diego and the USS New Orleans that comprise the amphibious-ready group. So we're not even going to commit all the resources to it. Again, who is advising him? And are the people there just yes men, afraid of his wrath? Afraid to tell him that his wishes are not going to come true, that sooner or later they're going to have to talk to this guy. Similar naval developments foreshadowed the opening salvo of the Iranian war on February the 28th. And so in addition to reopening the Strait of Hormuz, they reportedly studied seizing Iran's Karg Island. Trump told Fox News on Friday that Karg Island was not currently a priority, but that his mind could change. He said, I might do it just for the fun of it. This is how unserious this clown is, just for the fun of it. I might kill a whole bunch of people. I might destroy the global economy. I might get a lot of U.S. soldiers and Marines killed, but it'll be fun. It'll be fun. It's good to be the king, you know, as Mel Brooks said. Always taco. He's always changing his mind. He's always changing his objectives. He's always capricious and odious in everything that he does. And so he says, it's not on my list, but it's one of many things I can change my mind in seconds, he said. Yeah, we noticed. Yeah, I don't like what that guy in Canada said. So I'm going to jump up their tariffs to 100% or whatever. The 2-week conflict hasn't impacted the island, with Iran exporting more fuel than before the war started. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll confirmed in an interview Friday that his branch of the armed forces had sent 10,000 interceptor drones used against Russian forces in Ukraine to counter Iranian strikes targeting American military positions, as well as civilians in Israel and Arab states. Driscoll told Bloomberg News that the AI-enabled Merops drones, developed by a defense venture backed by Google CEO Eric Schmidt. This guy has now become Mr. Fantastic in the Pentagon. Eric Schmidt is the go-to guy for the Pentagon now with all these different projects. He's making a ton of money. They were sent to the Middle East within 5 days, they said, of the start of Operation Epstein Fury. Cost about $14,000 to $15,000 each. So it's cheaper than Iran's notorious Shahed drones. So as they pointed out, they said, well, we're on the better end of the cost curve here. This is Pentagon logic. Somehow we win because their drones are $20,000 and ours are $15,000. We're still throwing away $15,000 on each of these suicide drones as it goes. But hey, who cares, right? So Zelensky's offered to assist the U.S. and its partners in shooting down the Iranian thing, an offer that Trump dismissed out of hand. Said he's the last guy I need help from. So we know more about drones than anybody. And we have the best drones in the world, actually. Well, actually, you don't. Actually, China can produce a lot more than the U.S. does. The U.S. is a tiny, tiny fraction of a percent of production compared to what China does. And again, Trump thinks that China is going to help to open up the Strait of Hormuz. This all works to their advantage. They don't have to do anything. It's all hubris and ego politics on Trump's part. But even his ego, Trump is begging for help on the dire straits that he's in right now, dire straits of his own making. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right. Well, actually, before we take a break, I've got a couple of comments here. Soylent Goy says, we know it's fake because BB only drinks espresso with sulfur. That's good. Audi MRR says, definitely a fake video. A real coffee shop employee would have spit in it.
Yeah, there isn't enough revulsion on the faces of the people around it for it to really be Benjamin Netanyahu.
That's right. That's right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
If you like the Eagles,
On a dark desert highway,
the Cars, and Huey Lewis in the News,
they say the heart of rock and roll is still beating.
you'll love the Classic Hits channel at APS Radio. Download our app or listen now at apsradio.com.
Well, welcome back. And let's talk a little bit about Epstein and about the pedophile of the United States, that POTUS, the guy who is in the White House right now. How Epstein lured girls to his Zorro ranch and kept authorities away. It's been several years now, but at least 10 women and girls have come forward about having been victimized there. And again, this is one of the reasons why the statute of limitations is there just as an insurance policy. Many times they're too afraid, especially when it comes to someone like Epstein. And one of the girls said, well, you know, he had all these pictures of famous people and all the rest of the stuff. I was afraid of the guy. I tried to escape at one point, but wrecked the machine. Anyway, to girls without much money who needed help with college or a career, visiting Jeffrey Epstein's 10,000-acre New Mexico ranch felt like being treated to an exclusive resort. Yeah, there you go. The victims eventually understood that Epstein had used money and power to exploit them for sex. Starting in 2006, they began to come forward. Not just the girls, but women as well. At least 10 have alleged that starting in the mid-1990s, let's see, that was when Trump was hanging out with them as well, right? Epstein groomed or abused them at the ranch. Half of them were teenagers when Epstein harmed them. Yet to this day, no one has fully accounted for the crimes committed there. And again, one of the most incredible aspects of this was the fact that he's setting this thing up as a baby factory. Was it eugenics? Were they setting up these babies to be used for sexual nefarious purposes, to sell them into a marketplace, to be used as sex slaves or for cannibalism? What was it? We don't know. We do know that some parents do sell their kids into trafficking, and one of the people who alleged that Trump had abused them as a child said that it was his parents who sold him into the Epstein thing. By the way, you know, when we look at Trump's connections to all this stuff, I think it's kind of interesting. I'd not noticed it until this weekend, but this SAVE Act that he's so excited about has as one of its key components something regarding the mutilation of minors. Of course, it's ostensibly about voting. And to say we're going to have voter ID at all the polls, and that you have to be a citizen, you have to check citizenship, you have to have a photo ID and that type of thing, and no vote by mail. Well, who was it that gave us vote by mail? That was never a thing until Trump. And of course, it would still allow absentee voting for people who are sick or out of the country, and that's always been there. But the idea that it would be at such a large scale just invited fraud, and we said that at the time. But the other thing that was there that I had not noticed before was no mutilation of minors unless the parents consent to it. I thought, what's going on with that? I mean, you know, no selling of children into sex trafficking networks unless the parents consent to it. How about no sexual abuse of the children unless the parents want to do it? Do we allow that? No. Why would you put that in there as a clause? When people cheer Trump along and cheer him for getting us off of woke, did they realize this guy is one of the woke pioneers? He was pushing to have a tranny in his women's beauty contest way before any of this stuff was on the radar for anybody, just like Michael Flynn was. Michael Flynn was pushing it at the Pentagon on the second of their Pride Month at the Pentagon. I think it was 2015. He had Chris Beck, the Navy SEAL, who, as an adult, he said he's now moved away from this and got his head together. But he said, they pushed me into this. And he said, if they can push me, an adult Navy SEAL, into this, what can they do to kids? And the guy who was pushing it the hardest was General Flynn, who has now reinvented himself, just like Trump has reinvented himself. but he plays the gay national anthem at all of his events, YMCA. And when you look at Melania and how she is loved by the LGBT lobby, how they give her awards, they hold parties at Mar-a-Lago, they play YMCA. Why can't people figure this out? And again, under what conditions would we allow parents to mutilate and sterilize their own children? That's wrong for parents to do that. That's the point at which the government legitimately needs to step in. You know, we talk about different spheres of authority. You know, we have government, we have different levels of government, different spheres of authority within government. We have things like the church and religious authority, so we don't step into that. We have the sphere of family and parents, a very important sphere. And the government should not get involved in that. Just like you shouldn't have a country attack another country. And yet, you know, when you look at something like, you know, the family being interfered with by the government, we have seen so much abuse by CPS. And most of the time, the government doesn't get it right. In theory, there ought to be a role for government to play in that if they could get it right. Because you can have a situation where the parents are abusing the children. In that case, some other authority needs to come in and do something about it because that institution is thoroughly corrupt and has become predatory and is harming the children within it. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about just the opposite of this. We're saying, well, no, we're going to allow for the LGBT. Trump and the Republican Party would allow the parents to abuse their children and would say, that's okay. You know, we give you permission to do that. Anyway, now with revelations about the ranch turning up in the Department of Justice's newly released Epstein files, including an unverified tip that 2 foreign girls died during sex and were secretly buried on the property, state officials are promising to finally figure out what happened there in the high desert. So there's 2 fresh investigations that have been launched, one by the New Mexico Department of Justice and one by a truth commission of 4 state lawmakers. Notice that the feds still don't care. And the feds have promised that they're going to help and they're going to get involved somewhat. But if they do, it'll probably be to confiscate evidence and to do a cover-up. A new owner is redeveloping the property into a Christian retreat, and that's the Huff-Hines family. The guy is running for office in Texas, and he's getting a lot of heat for that, just for buying the property after the fact. The ranch still elicits a sense of shame for New Mexico. And for New Mexicans who drive by on Highway 41, locals have erected a memorial outside the entrance, laying flowers, hammering crosses into the ground, and hanging protest signs demanding justice. Well, I think there's a certain symmetry to this now, because you have, when you look at this, they're going to change the Epstein Ranch, the Zorro Ranch, into a Christian retreat. In the same way that Epstein's buddy and pal, who were running together all this time, he now himself has become something of a Christian retreat, hasn't he? For the Christian nationalists, people like Hegseth and the church that he's associated with. In a sense, what they're retreating from is principle. And what they're buying into is a fairy story about the magic land of Israel, you know, that magic kingdom. But as one person said, she said it really was like Disneyland. That's Virginia Guthrie, who was central to the issues around the man who used to be called Prince Andrew, and who allegedly committed suicide last year, overshadowed by his other real estate holdings, such as his 7-story Manhattan townhouse or his private island in the Caribbean. But in some ways, it was more lavish and more secluded acres of grassland, a wide open sky and mountains in the distance. One of his victims, Virginia Guthrie, compared the ranch to Disneyland, writing in her memoir about, quote, manicured grounds, gurgling fountains, a tennis court, and a grass airstrip and hangar. She wrote that the property, quote, had its own miniature town that housed his servants and groundskeepers. He called his main house his castle, she wrote. Guthrie, who took her own life last year, allegedly lived in 2 worlds at the ranch, she said. finding solace in the outdoors while enduring unspeakable abuse, her family said. She took all the beauty she could from it, but there was a lot going on behind closed doors that was horrific, said her brother. Guests there included filmmaker Woody Allen and linguist and social critic Noam Chomsky. And the newly released files show Epstein's unsuccessfully urging others to visit, including Elon Musk and LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice has released the interview with a woman who claimed that both Trump and Epstein sexually assaulted her as a minor. So I say POTUS is now stands for not President of the United States, but Pedophile of the United States. He deserves that title, I think. The woman also makes unsubstantiated claims that Trump, quote, had illegal building permits, and she heard him talking about washing money through casinos. And then we have more Epstein connections. This is the Alexander brothers appeared connected not only to Epstein, but to Israel and to Jared Kushner. What a surprise. It's like a pattern, isn't it? The Alexander brothers appeared in the Epstein files by first name, but Thomas Massey says, I noticed DOJ redacted their last name and the FBI email contained in, and he references the document. He said, but at the same time, FBI Director Cash said there was no evidence of sex trafficking in the files. So these are brothers who have now been convicted of sex trafficking. These are guys who were real estate brokers, and they were selling big ticket properties to celebrities. People like Kim Kardashian and Kanye West and billionaire hedge fund manager Ken Griffin. So they were making a lot of money at this. And at the same time, they were found guilty of drugging and raping almost a dozen women that they met via dating apps and celebrity social events, including one victim who alleged that she was raped by the two of them and by two other men when she was just 16 years old. Jurors watched a video of a drugged-up 17-year-old girl being raped by one of them, with a woman testifying that she was unaware of the video until federal prosecutors reached out and informed her of the footage. And so Thomas Massey pointed out the brothers were named in the Epstein files, but the Department of Justice redacted their last names. He said, but Director Kash Patel said there was no evidence of sex trafficking in the files. Well, their parents came to America from Israel in the 1970s, and they were also at the 2020 White House Hanukkah party after being invited by Jared Kushner. These guys have been found guilty. They are awaiting sentencing. They could get 15 years apiece. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back.
Plant the seed in our homeland, boys. Let it grow where all can see. Feed it with our devotion, boys. Call it the Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty.
It's your move. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Hear news now at apsradionews.com or get the APS Radio app and never miss another story.
Got a comment here from Gard Goldsmith, Liberty Conspiracy. He said if Netanyahu is smart, he'll use this fight to leave Israel with his wife, then have agents of his push the AI-generated coffee shop, etc. issue to promote the idea that he's dead. That's right. Yeah, going to ground, he could do an Adolf Hitler there, right? But speaking of Epstein, we've now got a United Methodist lady pastor who served as a personal assistant for Jeffrey Epstein, beginning about a decade after he was a convicted pedophile. You know, I know that the United Methodists really like and have gotten on board with LGBT and pushing same-sex marriage, but this is taking it to another level. Her name is Stephanie Remington, and she worked for Epstein first as an administrative assistant from August to December 2018, then as a temporary property manager at the island from January until May of 2019. Maybe he needed her for some of the rituals at the temple. What do you think? Now she has been noticed in these documents. And as a matter of fact, she was a United Methodist pastor for 15 years. Then she took a leave of absence in 2016 after she divorced her husband. And then she moved to the U.S. Virgin Islands and went to work for Jeffrey Epstein. Not a great resume that she's got here. As a matter of fact, she is mentioned, I think, where's the number here? I think it's something like, 1,800 times in the Epstein files. She was intimately involved with him. Didn't see anything, I'm sure, right? So again, this is all, she started working for him 10 years after he was a convicted pedophile, and very active there as well. We have pro-lifers have defeated an abortion clinic buffer zone law, as well as some other municipal speech bans. And these are lawsuits are being taken out against municipal speech bans. And I look at this and I think, this is one of the things that really bothered me about these Doug Wilson churches. Doug Wilson, again, a pastor from Idaho. And I've read some of his stuff before, and I thought some of it was very insightful. But I've been very disappointed to see what they're doing politically. His take on Christian nationalism, as well as his standing behind and being associated with War Pete. I've said for the longest time, he needs to be educated and or disciplined, but at the very least, they need to disassociate themselves away from a lawless murderer who boasts about his lawless murders. And so when you had the Don Lemon and a bunch of these people disrupt a church, it was one of these church plants that Doug Wilson has. And their response was, we need the FACE Act enforced. No, you need the FACE Act removed. It's more important for you to have to make sure you don't have any protesters at your church services than it is for people to be able to speak to women who are about to kill their babies. Really? That's your priority? How sick is that? And so this is in a local area where they have pushed back against this. Clearwater, Florida, banned pro-life activism, such as handing out pamphlets in a 38-foot buffer zone around an abortion clinic. So-called sidewalk counselors were sued. So again, this is not a federal law. But you got people, these Christian nationalists who, because their church service was interrupted by Don Lemon and people who are protesting War Pete, they want the FACE Act enforced. That federal law, they'll do the same thing. Meanwhile, when you look at these issues, Christina Applegate talked about the pain of aborting her child for the sake of her career. Of course, she was on Married with Children and several other things. She just recently published her memoir, You with the Sad Eyes. She said that she had an abortion at the age of 19. And she said, I knew at the time that abortion was murder and that she was killing her child. Those are her words. And so she's now 54 years old. And she quoted what she wrote down in her diary at the time. She was a teenager then, 19. Talked about her inner turmoil of sacrificing her child for the sake of her career, knowing full well that the pro-abortion narrative about the non-humanity of the life that she carried was a lie, and the baby she was about to abort was, she said, incredible. She said, I always thought that if I got pregnant and it was the wrong time, I thought, oh, well, whatever, It isn't even a baby yet. She said, that is BS. The creature is incredible, and it makes me feel whole and safe. And then she said, then her diary took a brutal turn. She says, I'm pregnant and I'm killing my child on Thursday. I'm thinking, where can I go to recuperate from murder? His family will hate me when they find out that I killed his family member because they don't believe in it. But I can't have his baby because I have work to do to entertain the world. Besides, I can't. Not now. In June of 1991, about 3 months pregnant and days away from undergoing her abortion, she wrote a poem to her child, whom she believed to be a girl. She said, hello, little thing. I feel you every moment of my day. Such a tiny existence, such an immense effect you have. You are a miracle, a tiny-handed miracle. It kind of reminds me of what Stevie Nicks did. She wrote that song, Sarah, and that was about a baby that she aborted and named. But she goes on to say, but you know your fate. It's not your time. I know you didn't make the decision, but it can't be your time. You will live on, though. You will live through another. I don't know what she means by that. I hope you will forgive, but I want you to know how you have changed me. So the following day, she entered in her diary, well, it's over. I feel pretty okay, just kind of woozy. That gives me no time to realize what I have done, which is most likely the best thing right now. Applegate, who for the last 5 years has suffered from debilitating effects of multiple sclerosis, said, it's almost as if I could see a future in which the bill for all the guilt and unhappiness and trauma would be paid for in my body. Over the years, countless women, especially in the entertainment industry, have been sold the lie that the only way they can be successful is to kill their preborn children, said Live Action's Bridget Salicki. She said, as Applegate's experience indicates, the killing of a preborn child leaves a lasting mark on the mother. Contains a contrast with what Leah Darrow, a former contestant on America's Next Top Model, said shortly after actress Michelle Williams used her award acceptance speech to promote abortion at the Golden Globes in January 2020. Darrow, who was then in labor, took the time to record an Instagram video challenging Williams' statement that abortion was integral to her success as an actress. She said in her video as she was in labor, she said, I'm here getting ready to deliver my 5th baby, and I want to let you all know, all you young ladies, she said, who haven't had babies or are maybe listening to what culture says about birth and women and babies and choice, babies do not keep us from our dreams, she said. Well, there was the story of Carrie Prejean Baller. You might remember her as Carrie Prejean. She was a beauty contestant, and she was kicked out and lost her title because she would not toe the politically correct line of same-sex marriage because it was against what she religiously believed. So she stood for her religious liberty. She was put on the Religious Liberty Commission, and we talked about that, the fact that this lieutenant governor from Texas, Dan Patrick, wanted her off and said she was fired because they had, we've already passed the time here. Well, let me finish this first because I want to play what she had to say about that. She said, you can't fire me. President Trump was the one who appointed me, and he has to fire me. Well, he did that. What was her crime? Why was she fired? Well, because the Religious Liberty Commission was having a meeting about anti-Semitism, and she raised the question, well, is it anti-Semitism to criticize a political government? How dare you even bring that subject up? We need to kick you off of the council. And so she said, Trump has now officially removed me from the Religious Liberty Commission for exercising my religious liberty. She said the only Catholic woman who opposes Zionism was removed as a prelude to the Iran war. And she said, and he didn't even do it in person. She went on with Tucker Carlson, had this to say.
I know what the Catholic Church teaches. We are the new Israel. That's what the church teaches. We are the fulfillment of the old Israel. I mean, look at Jesus fulfilled it all on the cross. He got, when he said it is finished, the old was completely done. There is the new covenant now. Those who are in Christ, that is the new people of God. It is very clear. This isn't even debatable. I don't even know why we're having this debate, which is why Bishop Barron and Cardinal Dolan should be like, yeah, it's what we believe. We are the new Israel.
Don't you dare debate it. You don't have the liberty to do that.
The land means nothing anymore. Yes, it's the Holy Land, but that's not some biblical. What are they going to? What's scary, Tucker, is these people like Paula White and Ted Cruz and Dan Patrick, they believe that there will be, the Dome of the Rock will be torn down and they will rebuild that third temple. They're saying it now. Look at Pete Hegseth. There will be a rebuilding of this temple.
Oh, I know.
It is heretical and it is anti-Christian.
I know that.
Because they're going to bring in the animal sacrifices again. And the most anti-Semitic thing that they believe is that 2/3 of the Jews are going to be slaughtered. That's what these people believe. They're just manipulating them and using them. They don't really care.
Oh, everything you've said is true. I mean, Jesus describes himself as the temple.
Yes.
So
he is the temple.
Well, he says that.
He is the lamb that was slain, the final sacrifice.
So, yeah.
How many times does it have to be said in the New Testament over and over again by Jesus, by the apostles, that Christ is the cornerstone, we're the living stones building a new temple? They say, oh, they're replacing Israel. And it's like, we replaced the Old Testament. The Old Testament was a picture of the spiritual reality in Christ. What these people are doing is they're replacing Christ with the worship of a political entity. Zionism is political. It is the idea that they're going to establish this homeland, and it wasn't necessarily even going to be in Israel initially. They just wanted to have a Jewish homeland that could call themselves, and they could call it. They could run it themselves and accumulate there. But it wasn't necessarily even tied to the so-called Holy Land. And there's nothing holy about that land. I mean, you can go there and you can see the places where things happened, but that doesn't make it something that needs to be worshipped. And this whole crusader mentality of War Pete is nothing but cosplay, in my opinion. And the Crusades were idiotic to start with. But when you go back to the Bible, it makes it clear that we don't have a relationship with God because of something physical. There's no difference between men and women or slave people or free people. And there's no special thing cut out for people because of their genealogy either. And so when it comes to replacement, what are we replacing? Are we replacing Christ with the worship of a political entity that doesn't want to have debate, that seeks to shut down both freedom of speech as well as the free exercise of religion, the political entity that has bought our Congress and bought our president and has pushed us into a war? That's reality that we're faced with. And that's where we stand right now. That's where this mess really is going. But we're over time, so we're going to go ahead and cut it there. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good day. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.